All right, I think we're unmuted now, and I think we are fully live. Everybody, hello out in virtual world, Facebook, YouTube. Special night tonight. We're celebrating 40 years of Sierra Nevada Brewing Company, and what a honor and how cool this is going to be. It's going to be Byron and I. Uh, Ship of Fools driving the ship, and we have Captain Ken and First Mate Brian with us tonight to tell some good old stories and really get down to the nitty gritty of Sierra Nevada in 40 years. And thanks, guys, for taking some time out and sharing with everybody out there.
Looking forward to it, Terrence. Should
My
be fun.
pleasure, yeah.
Cheers. What is everybody drinking to start out?
I got a Northern Hemisphere.
Nice.
Starting out with a pale ale.
And Brian's drinking water.
Still drinking water.
Damn. Okay. Well, hey, we'll take an extra sip for you, Brian.
Cheers.
How's everyone doing? Everyone doing okay?
Doing great.
Okay.
Yeah, wonderful.
So really, I think the journey we go down is the roots, the beginning. Ken, I know we've talked about this a little bit. The torturous path of wanting to start a brewery. Maybe tell the people like a little bit of like how'd you fall in love with beer? Because I know it was before you were 21, but we can tell that story now. But how'd you fall in love with beer and decide that beer was going to be the journey?
Actually, I had a unique upbringing. My neighbor, just a few doors down, was a home brewer way back in the day. So he started home brewing when he was in college, I think in the 50s. And he was studying science. He ended up being a scientist, a metallurgist. But he was an avid, he was a foodie. He was a cyclist. He was a mountain climber, but he was also a very serious home brewer, home winemaker, sake maker, distiller early on. So he did it when he was in college. And as I was growing up from a pretty young age, I would go hang around his house with his son, Greg, and Dad was always brewing. And so on the weekends, he'd be boiling pots of malt and hops, and you'd have rows of carboys down the hallway fermenting all sorts of different stuff. And eventually he ended up building a cold room. And I mean, he was a serious home brewer for this. When I was growing up, it was in the 60s. And,
So was that was I don't want to incriminate him, but wasn't it illegal at that time, or was it's still kind of legal? And
actually, home winemaking was legal. Home brewing was illegal. Home distilling was definitely illegal, but he was a little bit of an outlaw. And
Okay.
he took his
I think he was just a
fermentation.
failed baker, right? Right, a little bit wet.
Yeah, but no, he baked too. I mean, he was one of those guys who did everything. He was into the culinary arts back when it was not a thing, and he got into brewing and took it pretty seriously. And so when I was growing up, from ages 6 or 7, there was always something bubbling in their hallway, and it smelled fascinating. And so I grew up seeing that my whole youth. And then we started sneaking a little bit of his stuff. And one day he said, "Go make your own beer." So I thought, okay. So around 1969, I went down. We had a homebrew shop and went and got a tub and some malt and hops. And actually, back then, you could buy malt and hops at the hardware store, sort of leftover from Prohibition times. You get a crock and a little package of yeast, which was probably baker's yeast at the time, and you could buy it all at a hardware store and make beer. So I started at a fairly young age, and then ended up moving up to Chico in 1972, and continued home brewing up there. Took all my stuff with me, and actually. We had a little still as well, so he'd give us bad wine, and we'd make grappa out of it. And so we were playing around pretty early on, and then I opened a homebrew supply store in the mid 70s, and in 1978 said I want to be a pro brewer for my livelihood, and started writing a business plan, sold the homebrew shop, and then started try to find money and build equipment. So that happened starting in 1978. Finally got it all together at the end of 1980 and made our first batch of beer 40 years ago this week, or actually the 15th will be next week. But 40 years ago this evening, I was probably welding our hop strainer. That was the last piece of equipment I needed to fabricate before we could brew. So I was in the final throes of putting the last pieces together.
You were done drilling the lauter ton, drilling all the holes in the lauter ton.
And I drilled 4,000 holes in sheets of stainless to make our lauter ton plates because I couldn't afford to buy perforated stainless back then.
Wow.
How many drill bits did you go through in that process?
I had a bag, and then I learned how to sharpen them, which is not easy, sharpening really small drill bits.
So I've seen him do it by hand growing up.
Yep. Yeah,
right.
I had a shop teacher, and he said, if there's nothing else you learn in this class, it should be how to sharpen a drill bit. And I still try to this date. It's not that easy to sharpen a real little drill bit.
No, I just go and buy a new one. Probably easier that way, right?
Any of those.
Right. Well, so you were always you were always good with your hands, or probably more, not so much, because I'm sure you had some failures along the way of, I've always heard that the radio never got put together at your mom's house. Is that true or not? Is that
toasters, radios, washing machine? I took the parts out of the washing machine to build something.
I heard Brian followed in your footsteps. Wasn't it a motorcycle? Is the part still in the garage?
No, never, Terrence.
But no, I bought my first welder when I was in high school, and actually at the end of junior high, before I was in high school, and started to play around welding. I had another neighbor who had a pretty well-equipped shop, and so the neighborhood kids would all go over to his house and build stuff. We'd work on mini bikes and go-karts, and
right.
So crudely weld with an AC buzz box, and then later on studied welding and chemistry. And
yeah, because you and your brother were kind of into cars and that kind of stuff too, right? Or
he was into driving them, I was into fixing them.
Okay.
I rebuilt the transmission in this Austin Healey 3000 when I was 15 or so, and first time around I left out a couple of bearings or a couple of shims or something. I had to take the whole thing apart again after I found a couple leftover pieces, but eventually got it back together again. But no, I was never old enough to drive the cars I worked on. He sold them before I had a chance.
So I know, because Brian, when you guys were kind of putting the brewery together in North Carolina, like we see the pictures of you and your dad underneath the bottling lines and all that kind of stuff, right? So you guys have always been kind of tinkerers, right? Oh, how cute!
No. Yeah, those were all Photoshop, Terrence.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah. Is that how you polished the kettle back in the day?
Yeah.
He used to. I'd use his head and wipe it around.
Yeah.
We've always been hands on. I mean, you have to know what's going on in your breweries, not just for the sake of making beer, but just for your own understanding and your team as well. I mean, we're still intimately involved with every single day, daily operations. And, when you're trying to make beer to the quality that we are, you're chasing, little tiny bits of oxygen here and there. You're chasing valve, lifts, you're chasing water chemistry, you're chasing everything. I mean, constantly trying to make sure things are perfect. And in any, operation, things wear out, things shift. Mother Nature never gives you the same thing twice. So it really takes a whole team, really with their thumb on the beat, trying to figure out, how do we make things perfect every single time. And you just got to know your brewery.
Right. And that's, I kind of look back, Ken, back in the day when you first started, with Sierra Nevada. Obviously it was you and then Steve Harrison, first employee. Your early staffing, like everybody had to do everything, right? I mean, pretty much had to, you had to package beer, you had to brew beer, you had to do all that stuff.
I brewed Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'd package Tuesday, Thursdays. And then Steve Harrison would come help pack. I had a partner, Paul. He did the lab work. Yeah, there I am. I made the comment the other day, so I remember all my old bottle fillers. I know some people remember their first girlfriends. I remember my first bottle filler. So there's actually a number.
Yeah, did you name them, Pops? That's the real question.
Yeah.
That's the Semco 320. I started out with a Dixie single head that I never used. So that's filler 2 right there. And then I got Fritz Maytag's Meyer 24 and ran that. And then I had a 60 valve Semco when we first came to 20th Street. So
What do you have now? Can you name it?
we've got a bunch of them. Yeah. So we've got Mills River. We got 2 Crohn's, Crohn's bottle filler and a Crohn's can filler. Chico, we've got a KHS can filler and 2 Crohn's bottle fillers and a new KHS kombucha filler. And a little inline can filler we're going to replace shortly. So
Nice,
Cool.
yeah. Well, I think that's so true, Brian. Is you really gotta understand all aspects. Like I remember now you're doing a lot of stuff with customer experience in the restaurant, and spending a morning with you before and getting in everybody's way, and we were making pancakes. And that's still one of my funnest days, doing that collaboration with Sam when we made took his maple syrup and made pancakes. Wasn't that National Pancake Day? We found out that morning.
Yeah, it was IHOP was trying to make beer or something.
Oh, yeah, that's
right. I said, well, hell, we'll make pancakes then.
Yeah, we'll one up you.
But yeah, I mean, even when it's the attention to details in your restaurants, I mean, it doesn't. We have a saying at our brewery, which is everything communicates, and that 132 valve Crohn's filler that we have in North Carolina is just as important as the flat top grill that we have in the kitchen. It's just as important as the microscopes. I mean, everything really plays a part. You're only as strong as your weakest link, and everything matters.
Yep, absolutely. I think Ken and I had a conversation about this a couple of days ago, right? And I had excuses, and you know what your dad told me? No excuses,
Terrence. Are wise.
Yeah, right. So Ken, I wanted to really mention a little bit because like over the years, we've had some great collaborations. Brian, you've been on those, with Beer Camp and different breweries, things of that nature. You talk about Brooks, with Vinny, doing the Life and Limb with Sam out of Dogfish Head, literally all the Beer Camp collaborations. And I wanted you to maybe talk a little bit, Ken, about how just the craft beer industry and for me, like how cool it is and how tight it is. It's like, yeah, we're there's a competitive aspect because we're all trying to sell beer and there's shelf space and there's things like that. But how craft beer became this kind of just tight knit family and taking care of people. I look at like Quintopia and you us getting a hold of Tom and him using the brew house right now until he can get up and running, and other help we've done along the way of smaller brewers, and what inspired you to do that kind of stuff? I know a little bit of I know it. I'm going to feed you in, but you had a little bit of that in your early days too, right?
Yeah, most definitely. So, yeah, going back to 1980. So, those of you who weren't around and knew the beer scene there, then there was 43 breweries in America, brewing companies total. That was including AB, Miller, Stroh, Schutz, and all the little guys. And I actually just looked at that list the other day, and out of those 43, there's like 3 or 4 small brewers left. Pretty sad to see so many of them. Either the brewery's been closed, the brand's been sold. So it was a really small industry back in that day. And as I was getting into it, I went and visited Fritz Maytag and Jack McAuliffe at New Albion. But I actually made connections with people at AB. I was in the Master Brewers back in the early 80s. I could call up somebody at Coors, and when we needed malt, they would ship us some malt. So it was a very collegial industry going back, to my early days in beer. And so I felt it was important that we help give back and support the industry, because I was so well supported by so many all those years. I remember Fritz Maytag used to tell me that when he first started, he was so small, and he realized his yeast was infected, and so he would go to there was, I think at that point, 2 or 3 big breweries in San Francisco, and he would get yeast from them. And he said he didn't want to bug the same brewery twice, so he'd get yeast from one of them, 1 month, and then yeast from another one. And so a little bit of variability there, but they would help him out. And Fritz, I remember saying, he was shocked that he ended up being the only brewery left in San Francisco in the late '70s. So
Wow.
much different times, but the brewing industry did help each other out, and they still do.
Right. And that's so. I know prior to that you had your kind of struggles where, and maybe some of it was during those times of like, do I keep going, keep chugging on, and what drove you, other than the fact that you borrowed money from people and you had to pay them back. Other than that, what kept you going?
No, there was certainly that. I mean, I went all in, so I took all my life savings and I worked really hard for, a couple years to get the brewery started. So it wasn't like I had a backup plan. I had, leveraged everything I had, put it all in. And so there was no way I was going to give up. So even though things were pretty brutally tough for the first few years, it was, there was no backup plan. That had to work. And so I just kept plugging away and trying to make more beer and trying to, make money. In the early days, we barely made any profits. We didn't pay ourselves really hardly anything. So I worked a second job, and it was just a slog. And then, we got sort of over the hump once we got to 3,000 or 4,000 barrels. We could pay ourselves a living wage, which wasn't much, few $100 a month. And then kept investing back in and making more and more beer. And we got up to, I don't know, 4,000 or 5,000 barrels, and bought this brew house in Germany, and had plans to do a big expansion, and then couldn't raise the funds again. And so just kept at it until we had enough of a track record. And eventually, in the late '80s, we were able to build the 20th Street Brewery, the first phase of that. And, to talk about how different things were. So we were at a little over 10,000 barrels, and I designed the new 20th Street Brewery in Chico to do 60,000 barrels, which I thought would be, no way. That'd be a long shot that we'd get to 60,000 barrels. So that's actually the
west side.
That's the west side,
Yeah.
not the east. So that's the second expansion in Chico. But we went from 10,000, actually a little over that, 12,000 barrels or so, to almost 20,000 the first year on 20th Street, and then to 30,000, and then to 45,000, and next year 60,000. So we were growing much faster than I could have imagined. And again, thinking back, early '80s, Anchor was less than 50,000 barrels, and they were, in my opinion, compared to us, really well capitalized with Fritz Maytag and his family money. But we grew quickly, and the craft industry was at that point struggling a bit, but still seeing some brewers growing, and some were failing. But overall, it was a time of growth.
So you went to Europe and Germany, and bought that brew house that's the original one at 20th Street.
Right.
You sat on that for a number of years, right, before you actually.
Yeah, actually, I just saw a question. So yeah, I did go tour breweries in Belgium, Germany, UK. Paul and I went on a earlier reconnaissance mission, pretty much after we opened. So we were making beer, and those of you who know who Michael Jackson was, the beer writer, not the singer. We got a visit from Michael Jackson when we were still in construction phase, and he came visited us, and then so we made a trip over to the UK and visited him and toured English breweries.
His infancy.
What? So yeah, made some pilgrimages to Germany, and then went back and bought the brew house a couple years later.
There it is, right there.
It is, yeah. I took my high school buddy Dave Sheets and I went over, and we worked with some Germans for actually a couple of weeks, dismantling the brew house and getting it crated up and shipped back to America. And then he had sat for years because I couldn't afford to put it into a building, and nobody would loan me any money.
Wow, that's amazing. That is well, I know I loved brewing on that brew house. Some of my funnest times. I think one of my fondest memories is early on in I've maybe told this story before. So if anyone has listened before, I apologize. But it was great. Remember we had that mash tun. You had purchased a mash tun for upstairs, and the grain chute would always get plugged up. And I know I was relieving Melanie. She was on shift, and I was working the graveyard. And I'm looking around the brew house, and no one's in the brew house. And I'm like, I can hear this noise up there. So I go upstairs, and Melanie's at the bottom of the stairs, and you're up, and you're cleaning out the chute where the grain's coming through because it's all clogged up. And anyways, you're yelling down at us, and we can't hear a word you're saying because the agitator's going in the mash tun. And then all of a sudden, I catch what you're saying, and you said, "You're boiling over." And I look around the corner, and there's steam coming up the staircase, and I had to go down and turn the steam off, realizing as I got to the bottom of the stairs, and this is my first summer there, I was wearing Tevas with no socks, and I had to tiptoe across boiling wort to turn off the steam, but I was going to do it for you because I didn't want to get yelled at. No.
What are we learning about safety shoes, Terrence?
I know.
Well, people walk through glass, so that's not much different.
Yeah.
Molten lava. So that brew house originally was only designed, it was only 2 tanks. So a combination kettle mash tun and a separate lauter tun. And it was really 1 brew a day was all it could brew. And as we grew, we needed to make more beer than that. So I designed and put that mash tun upstairs. But yes, it had a couple of design flaws.
Well, it was also designed to brew German beers, which a lot less malt that was winning those beers.
Yeah.
It was designed to brew, roughly a 5% alcohol lager.
Yeah, like 13 Plato,
maximum
13. Yeah. So you've got a lot of
0.8. I think the original recipe they had for their pills was like under 12 Plato.
Welding on that, the coils under the kettle actually broke, and that's all copper. We had to weld that up copper. It was a pain, and we had to re-rivet. We had to take that whole thing apart to do maintenance on that kettle and slide it up and pop it back down, and hand peening those rivets. That was a nightmare.
You could always find the steam leaks whenever you walked underneath it, and you would get a nice little drip of boiling steam on the crown of your head. It's probably where all those scars come from up here. It's either that or hitting the bottom of the uni tanks. One of the two. I don't know. You know, I've had a few accidents in my day, Brian.
That's why we don't let you in the brew house anymore, parents.
I know. I'm banned from the brew house. I can only do Facebook Live. That's it. And that's getting shady. Okay. What German brewery did you buy it from?
It was called the Bavaria Brewery in the town of Aschaffenburg. And it was just at the edge of Bavaria. So they were stretching things a little bit, but so not too far from Frankfurt. But those of you may know Aschaffenburg, it was a military town as well. And they had 2 breweries in the town at the time. The Highlands beer and Bavaria beer. And Bavaria beer was family owned, and they had no children, and they were going to sell the property for a shopping center. And so the brewery had been closed, and it was a really cool old brewery. I got to roam around at night. The guy gave me the keys, and it went down 3 or 4 levels under the street with big ice caves down there. So it was from the air before refrigeration, and they had a chute. They would cut blocks of ice and drop them in, and they had old wooden and steel cellar tanks that were every other one of these big arched roofs. One was filled with ice, next one was filled with tanks, ice tanks, and they would allow them to lager through the summer with all the stored ice. So it was a cool thing to roam around with a flashlight. Yeah, we walk, no lights or anything. Walk down these flights of stairs down into the cellars.
So do you think those basements are still there? Like still?
I would imagine.
Probably the inventory for the Kmart that went in.
Yeah, it could be. Who knows?
Yeah. So so both of you has spent a little bit of time in Germany, and like, so Ken, I know you fell in love with a few styles of beer, German style beers, and I was hoping you could talk a little bit about those styles and what you liked about them. And Brian, you too. I know you've spent some time in Germany, and you know, what other than American style ales of like what we make, right? So.
Well, the Kellerweiss was a style that I fell in love with, and we had a German friend working for us at the time, and he was working also for Gutmann, a brewery outside of Nuremberg. And so we went and visited them, small family.
Rudy, right? It's Rudy, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Rudy was our mutual friend. Yeah. So he worked for both us and for Gutmann. And so we went over there, and they shared their yeast with us and a little bit of know-how, and we ended up making, I think, a really authentic German wheat beer.
We should actually invite Rudy back to California, because remember, every time he would come visit and he would stay, it would rain the whole time he was here. He always thought California was like full of beaches and sunny and all this stuff. So we should just bring him back when we need more rain. Right?
He used to buy like a Datsun every time too. He used to buy a car and ship it back every time.
He would buy Datsuns in the U.S. and ship them back to Germany because they were all rested over there.
I didn't know that story. That's pretty good. Rudy, where are you? Anyways, Brian, what about what kind of styles of beer did you kind of fall in love with when you visit Germany?
Oh, it's more probably the experience than just the style. You know, Kolsch is going to Cologne and alt beers and Rauch beers. You know, to me, I tend to go over in the later months of the year where it's a little colder, and you know, it's the big feast, and you know, the experience of actually drinking the beers where they came from, where they originated, is pretty special to me. So it's more probably the experience than just the beer. But it's entertaining when you have someone have their first Rauch beer, and they're just, you know, what the hell is that? That's always a fun one.
You know, we've had a long history with doing Oktoberfest collaborations with German brewers, so we've had some really fun experiences going over there and going to beer festivals or. Excuse me.
Yeah, like sharing styles, like they made hoppy styles, and you know, I mean, for me, one of the things that I think a lot of American drinkers, and I would love, like, kind of both of your perspectives a little bit of, like, you talk about that, Brian, that experience, right? Of like everything is generated, like in the pubs, is like you have a particular beer and you have a glassware for that beer. And you don't get that experience in America. And you know, Charlie always talks about that, you know, the proper glassware for the proper beer, and the, you know, all those kind of things, and why that is never really translated in America.
Yeah, very, very different experience. I mean, a beer culture over in those Europe, and probably more so in Belgium than Germany, to be quite honest. But the pubs or the breweries were, you know, really part of the city center, and that's where people would go to hang out and really socialize, and it was an experience on its own. It's something that, you know, we've got to the point, and modern day craft brewers, I think, do a great job of really showcasing how family friendly our establishments really are. There's a difference between, you know, a more strictly you know, cocktail drinking bar than a local craft brewer's pub. You know, trying to service two very different groups and two very different audiences. I do remember back to beer styles. So when we went over to buy, I think it was the last time we went to buy the Mills River kettles. It was right when we had won Best Pilsner in the world. I've got my trips mixed up, but there was an article of how Sierra Nevada was killing German beer or something like that. And we showed up. Yeah, we showed up and it was like, hey, we're the Grossman from Sierra, and it was not the warmest welcome that we've received a few times.
At least you weren't dropping stones onto beer. Just gotta say.
I do remember when we, unfortunately, my father was saying that the shopping mall with the last brewery, unfortunately, these breweries have closed down all over Germany, and they were selling these, hand-built, beautiful brew houses for scrap prices. And one of the breweries, we had to buy actually a couple of brew houses for the North Carolina brewery. And, when we showed up there, the guy thought we were scrappers in essence. Like, Sierra Nevada, I never heard of you. And he said, all right, look around. And he goes and Googles who we are. And he came back and said, okay, I'll sell it to you, because he was so passionate about his brewery that he wanted to see his kettles actually get another life. And so he never actually cashed in on the deal. We told him that, well, you sell them to us, pay him a fair price, but you can also come over and see these kettles make beer again. And I've yet to get that email, but I hope I do.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great. Now that's a collaboration right there.
Yeah.
So Terrence, I just cracked Celebration, and so I brewed this 39 years ago, probably a week or two ago, for the first one. That's not in that picture. It was pre this picture. Yep. So that's a little later. So it was in a long neck. The very first version was about 90 cases of Celebration the first time.
How was it received back then? Because I know that, like, you talk about 9 out of 10 people didn't like pale ale, and I always find it funny that you were like, "Well, I'm just going to make double pale ale and make Celebration."
It was 19 out of 20 hated it.
Yeah.
I went back through my old brewing notes and all of our test brews. So during the construction phase, so in 1980, we were brewing every week, making a test batch of beer, and I still have all those notes from all those beers. And one of the beers we thought we were going to go to market to was IPA, India Pale Ale style, and we thought it was too extreme. And it was actually a little bit of when I looked at the recipe, we were using some European hops, some German hops, which wouldn't have normally necessarily been probably the style of hops you would have used, but
very noble.
We thought it was too hoppy, and probably wouldn't fall, would be too out of most people's flavors. The Celebration Ale was something that, as homebrewers, we brewed very much like this. And so for us, it was like, yeah, we're doing 90 cases. We're going to brew something really intense and strong. And it was very well received, 90 cases. It got sold, but whether or not it was alienating for people who were struggling even with pale ale hoppiness. But it's still great. So the malt balance is such that it doesn't really, perception wise, isn't that much hoppier than pale ale, really.
No, and I think that's one of the things is like as palates have changed and as drinkers have changed, we've all kind of seen that is what was extreme 10 years ago is not so extreme today, and it's different. Bitterness is dropped. So when you look at like our hazy little thing, right? That's more in the wheelhouse of kind of what the drinker is looking for these days, and that's the fun thing. Too hoppy.
And alcohol is sweet as well. So those higher alcohol beers and obviously non-fermented sugars are going to balance out that bitterness.
Right. Brian, what's your go-to beer these days? I know you're drinking water tonight, but
Cold and in front of me, Terrence.
all
Cold
right.
and in front of me. No, I was Celebration Ale always, always really holds a pretty special spot in my heart, as does Pale. When I started working in the cellar, I actually worked for Terrence, my first boss. Taught me everything I know today.
That's why you're so screwed up.
That's why you're in North Carolina.
Yeah. I was 15 or 16, probably my first celly season, right around there. And that first cellar that my father was talking about to do the 60,000 barrels has a fermenter in it called a dish bottom tank, where it looks sort of like a dish bottom. And there is a chain that hangs inside of these tanks where we hook these pillowcase size tea bags, in essence, that are full of hops in. And that's where the dry hopping process comes in for Celebration Ale. Well, what you don't know is that when we do a cold break or we chill our beers, they go to -2°C, or about 30 degrees F, and they happen to absorb yeast and other cold sort of, I won't call it mud, sludgy. It's just yeast particles. But when you drain these tanks out, you have to remove these pillowcase sized tea bags that are now very heavy because they're saturated with beer and yeast and really cold. And you got to hunker through these small little manways, and your hands get extraordinarily cold, and you just got to work through it. And when you're doing all that labor at 15 and 16, you don't get to enjoy the product until you're properly of age of 21, of course. You learn the appreciation of that beer. So I do love drinking a Celly when it comes out. It's one of my favorites I look forward to every year.
So Brian, you have the mic right now, and I wanna ask this because a lot of Sierra Nevada is obviously your dad, right? Starting at 40 years ago, but you're part of that next generation, and you took on the responsibility of opening up, or at least managing the North Carolina facility, which is across the country from us. And what like when you decided to do that, other than like I can get out of my parents' hair and go have some fun, what kind of struggles did you have doing that? Obviously that's you're moving across the country, you're moving away from your family. That's definitely one. But if you could elaborate a little bit on that.
I didn't choose to do this. Actually, I was voluntold to move. I moved out here with a counterpart of mine, Stan Cooper is his name, who used to be, he's retired, but he used to be our head of logistics. And I remember, really as the story goes, it takes a number of years, obviously, to design a brewery from greenfield up, from start to finish, which we did with an internal team, and we partnered with one of our architecture firms that are friends of ours that have done a lot of work with us over the years. And we literally put pen to paper to design these things, and that came with basically a previous decision from the family, which was, okay, we have this good growth curve, we're going to run out of capacity in Chico. We've got a few options. We can sell the company, which we didn't really feel like doing that. You can expand in Chico, or you can expand east. And when you expand in Chico, there is advantages, right? There are some systems that have some capacity. Not all systems had capacity, but some did. So you wouldn't have to do everything, and you wouldn't have to do everything at once. It would keep the family together. It would, you wouldn't have to necessarily double your staffing. But on the other side of it is, shipping beer is heavy. It's expensive. There is a huge environmental impact. Those mountains get in the way. Glass is not light. Beer is not light. And we try to take the environmental, efficacy part into our decisions as well. And we came to the decision, literally in my sister Carrie's little girl's daughter's room, my niece Mim, Barbie dolls and everything around us. We're sitting on the floor saying, "Okay, we're going to do this," and that's when we started the effort. And I don't know, 6 months later, a year later, we're in a meeting and this comes up. Okay, Brian, Stan, you're moving east, and I'm pissed at Stan. Like, why the hell didn't you tell me we're moving east? And he's pissed at me. So we get out of this meeting. And it's like a great way to start a partnership, holding secrets. And he's like, why didn't you tell me? Like, so none of us knew. So it was great. And then I met my now wife actually at a Great American Beer Festival. And it started to get serious, and she said, okay, what's going on? I said, well, I got to move east. She said, okay, where? No idea. When? No idea. Okay. And then so we actually get married January 14th, and we're on our honeymoon on the 16th, and we're closing the deal for North Carolina. So I'm literally
who married you, Brian? You got to add that.
Yeah. So Vinny from Russian River got ordained and actually married my wife and myself. I used to say Vinny married me, and then that caused.
That's awkward.
What a power couple.
Yeah.
We literally closed the deal. I'm on the phone on the beach in Costa Rica with my wife on our honeymoon. I look over and say, oh, shit, we got to get an airplane. Governor's coming tomorrow. So we made it to Houston, and we had to have an aircraft pick us up to bring us up to the announcement. So if you look at the announcement pictures, we're really tan. That's why. So that was January 26th, I believe. And then my wife and I got pregnant, and my son was born in December, and we moved in January, exactly 1 month to the day. And then it was go, go, go.
Yeah. It's a beautiful brewery, though. I got to say, if there's anyone out there that hasn't been, I know we got a lot of California listeners. It's worth the journey.
So,
why North Carolina?
So I do look at Facebook, and there's a gentleman, Tony, and I'm sorry about your pronouncing your last name. Fischl, Fischhi, who saved a bottle of 1993 Bigfoot the year that his son was born, and shared it with him on his 21st birthday. I found a bottle. I was born in '85. I found a bottle of 85 Bigfoot in our crawl space under the house that I grew up in. I saved it for when my son was born. So my father and I split an 85 Bigfoot when my son was born. So good on you.
That's when I graduated from high school, Brian. When you were born, and I was probably tripping at some Grateful Dead concert somewhere. Anyways, so someone asked why North Carolina. Why? I think it's cool. If you've never been to Asheville, my thing is it's the Austin and Berkeley of the East Coast. That's my which is cool.
Yeah.
I can tell the story, but I think I'll let Brian, since he's out there.
I'll go for it. I just did the last one. You go for it.
Well, so when we started looking for a site, we actually started out with 200 potential communities.
Me. I had Asheville.
Yeah,
I had that, Terrence. We started with 200 potential communities, and Asheville was on the list. We had criteria that it had to be, a good community to live in, to do business in. It had to be a good state to live in. So we looked at Virginia, and we went all the way from Colorado to the East Coast, Pennsylvania. We went and looked at a whole bunch of places. We whittled the 200 down to 20 or 30. We whittled that down to a dozen. We did road trips. Family went on road trips. We visited the communities. We went to the schools. We, met with people. Our original inquiry, we didn't tell them we were a brewery or Sierra Nevada. We said a food plant wanted to locate in your community. and we were looking at workforce and wastewater and energy and land and railroad and zoning, and I mean dozens and dozens of criteria. But one of the criteria was we didn't want to move into any other brewery's backyard. And so we didn't want to, and we thought, okay, if some brewery wanted to locate in Chico, we'd be a little miffed if some other brewery was coming in to set up shop here, a bigger brewery. And so we eliminated we drew a circle around every existing reasonably sized brewery in the country and said, okay, we don't want to be in their backyard. And so
50 miles.
Asheville, which Terrence suggested, got eliminated on that criteria because there was already Highlands was there, and there was a brewing community. We really didn't want to.
And Asheville Brewing, there was a bunch.
Yeah.
So we actually found a great site in Tennessee, about 90 or 100 miles away from Asheville. And so we were looking at there. We were looking at a site in Ohio, one in Pennsylvania. Well, actually, we limited Pennsylvania, so it was
Roanoke.
Roanoke and in Tennessee, and they had some great sites and good potential. And I just had angst about the culture and the communities that we were looking at. There wasn't really a beer scene. There wasn't really a food scene. And so at one point, we were close to a decision on the Tennessee site, and decided, well, let's open up the log again of all those places we eliminated, and let's look at them. And Asheville rose back to the top, and I went and contacted the breweries that were in Asheville and said, we're thinking about Asheville. How do you feel about it? And I said, I want to come out and talk to you. So we flew out and had a meeting with all the Asheville brewers at the time. There were maybe that time a dozen, maybe.
Yeah, probably right around there.
You're missing a few key parts of that story, though, in between.
Well, some of the communities I told Brian he was going to have to move there, and some of the places I went to, he's like, I don't want to live here.
Yeah, some of them, they were just like, oh, yeah, we'll give you all the land you want and everything else. And it's like, I can see why.
Fargo, North Dakota didn't make the cut because
no.
Free electricity, whatever they were throwing at us. So we had a lot of offers of subsidies to move there, but we didn't really want to be there. And so we really fell in love with the Western North Carolina area, and we found a great site. And I was looking for 35 or 40 acres originally, and brought my team out there, and we started looking around. I was like, well, we really need a little more. And by the time we build this road, and we can't build here, and so we ended up with 70 or 80 acres. And then more people said, well, you need more land. We need to. What if somebody builds a building in this meadow? And so we finally ended up with 200 acres, over 200 acres in North Carolina, and most of it's wild and undisturbed. And we couldn't be happier. It's a really great spot.
Well, I think I want to point this out because we got to go to questions here soon. But I think one of the coolest things that both of you have done is you guys restored that entire property, pulling out all the non-native plants and ivy and all the stuff on the property to bring it back to its original natural state.
Well, not all of it.
Our team has done that.
Yeah.
I know. But so with your thoughts behind it, right?
215 acres, and the team has done a really great job of trying to bring it back to what it should look like. And we've also expanded our ag programs. We've got a really great ag program in our California brewery, where we grow hops, we grow our malt. We have some estate gardens that we grow some produce for our restaurants, and we've extended that same philosophy to North Carolina. Actually, Adam was picking up our sheep today to bring into our front meadow. We've got as a lot of people know, bees are actually getting hit pretty bad. So we've started a bee program on site as well. And we're actually collecting. We've got quite a bit of honey right now that I'll figure out something to do with it. Be pretty fun. Some chickens and maybe meat or something.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
But we are trying to actively work the property and trying to respect it as much as we possibly can.
Okay, wait a minute. That did you see that they came by, Beverly? Beverly says, "Happy birthday." I gotta say this is happy birthday to Ken Grossman and his lovely wife Katie. You guys didn't you have you had your birthday yesterday, right?
Yesterday was our birthday. We share the same birthday.
Yeah.
She's much older than me though. She's a year older.
Yeah. Married on April Fools.
Yeah.
This is appropriate. Anyways, yes. Happy birthday, Ken. I didn't get to tell you that yesterday. Anyways, I think we're gonna go with question time. Is everybody cool with that? You guys good with that?
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. Shoot. Kevin, bring him. Byron, you're reading.
All right. Any idea what the spring beer will be next year, or bringing any beers back?
Next question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, you can tell Wonderland. It's already out there. You could say it, Ken. So our spring starting in actually late December, January is a nectarine ale. So made with nectarines. It's 7.5% alcohol. Super excited about this beer. It's really, really killer. That's what I got to say. If you actually look up Wonderland, Sierra Nevada, you'll see the label from Brewbound. So I did that the other day. So that's how I know it's out on the interwebs.
To Colleen, yes, Cascade is the only hop we're committed to for pale ale. We're heavy Cascade users in that beer. So it's the predominant hop by far, if not 100%. So a little bit of bittering hops sometimes aren't Cascade, but everything is Cascade, I think, right now.
Such a versatile hop.
Yep.
Have you ever made a Rausch beer? Would you please?
We've made a lot of them.
Absolutely.
Styles, and my favorite town in the world to go drink beer in is Bamberg, by far. I've been there bunches of times.
I've drank a bunch of beer with you in Bamberg. I've drank a bunch of beer.
Whenever I'm in Germany, I make a point of going to Bamberg. I mean, beer is a style that alienates some, but it's just such a wonderful town. If you've never been there, if you go when we can travel again, you get to Germany, go visit Bamberg. It's very big. It's got a brewing museum there, which hopefully will be open again. But it is just a wonderful community.
So for those of you that don't know, Rauch beer is smoked beer, and a lot of people get hints of like a smoked ham bone mixed with their beer, which puts some off. I really enjoy it quite immensely.
Yeah, I'll
malted smoke over alderwood.
Yeah.
And there's some just a few variations in the town there, but it's really an experience there and drink.
Yeah, so we've made a mild version of that tumbler, which was maybe 5 to 7% of smoked malt in it, and so it's got a hint of it. But a true Rauch beer should be like large portions, right? 25, 30%.
We've made true Rauch beers over the years.
Yeah, I've always said that we've made them, and they've mainly been draft beer, and we don't sell a lot of them because Ken usually drinks it all and signs it out. So, so we don't. It's definitely his style.
Back into popular demand. Boy, that's a good question.
Nothing ever went out but Pilsners. I mean, Pilsners has got to be classic.
Yeah, I think so. We're planning on, and Ken has recently looked into building out our pilot innovation team and system, and we really want to kind of open up e-commerce to some one-off beers, and like a Rauch beer would be a great beer to have in our e-commerce portfolio, and definitely Pilsners. I want to see because we tasted it today, and Ken, you got to go in there. I know. The Trial Estate beer, that's a barley wine and more of an English style barley wine, is absolutely amazing.
I'm
Gotta
sorry, Ken, it's all gone. We after this
We
morning,
drank it today.
more and more people kept. No, we've still got some. That it's delicious. Like,
I'll be in there tomorrow morning to taste.
yeah, the fact that Admiral Malting was able to make a malt that and a true caramel malt instead of a crisp malt, it's delicious, and I can't wait for it to be bracked. But yes, I'll save some for you. Who came up with Old Chico?
Which evolution of Old Chico? So the original Old Chico was a crystal wheat that we did, and then we actually it was highly successful in our Chico market, and then we took that brand and we turned it into a brand family with crystal wheat and Bach and other beers. So it depends upon the context.
And we did this one.
Yep.
That eventually became.
Question about water. So one of the reasons why a lot of businesses, actually, there's a lot of pharmaceutical companies that locate in the Western North Carolina area because the water is so good. We've got our own wells at the brewery in North Carolina. Water is super soft, really, really pure water.
18 ppm total hardness.
Yeah, so it's super soft. So we actually have to harden it up a little bit to make it like Chico water and the water we use for most of our beers. But it's really a great base water. We've got our own wells in Chico as well, but a little bit more carbonate, a little bit more silica in Chico. So we actually soften the Chico water a little bit. We harden the Mills River water.
So I got to say, Ken, that's one of my least favorite experiences whenever I go back to North Carolina.
Shower
is trying to get the soap off of my body in the shower. It's like it takes too long.
Problem out there, Terrence. I think you're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
Just keep showering. Just
Is there a style of beer that you were surprised did so well?
I have to say hazy.
Yeah.
So,
That was a no-brainer. I was waiting. Like
I wanted you. I let you answer
that's
that.
like a softball question right there.
yeah, it's now almost the number one IPA in the country, and it did better than we had projected, which is a great thing.
Yeah, and it's an amazing beer. It was just with the I think the landscape of what we see in the beer industry is kind of a one and done. It is held the test of the last 3 years of like people wanting it more and more. So it's
one of the only beers that's growing 3 years in a row. Craft beers that's growing 3 years in a row, and it continues to grow.
I still last 35 years of perfecting clear beer, and then all of a sudden it's okay.
Yeah.
Put it back in.
It's actually it's harder to make cloudy beer right.
It is. It absolutely is.
Staple haze is difficult. Gravity gets in the way.
Any tips for the home brewer?
Clean it.
Oh,
Clean
awesome. I'm not sure where you're at in your home brewing
career,
but wort aeration. If you do nothing else, make sure you get your wort aerated and your yeast off to a really healthy fermentation. So I'd say I had a homebrew shop, and that was the biggest flaw, was not active fermentations. And, fermentation for a top fermenting beer should not take that many days. So 3, 4, 5 days at the most. So if you don't get enough wort oxygenation and proper wort balance of nutrients, that's where most homebrewers struggle.
You want to tell them your MacGyver fix in the early days for getting around that, Ken?
Well, I don't know if it's a MacGyver fix. It's what got us off of our lack of wort aeration. Is we actually sprayed the wort into the open fermenter through a fishtail spray, which a lot of the British brewers did back in the day as well. So it just allows enough oxygen to.
So you just neck it down, so it just.
Right? Actually, a fishtail, so it sprays.
Yeah.
Into the
Okay. Yep.
Full saturation.
Yep.
What about temperature?
Yes, temperature is very important. on what you're trying to brew and what yeast strain you have, and what flavor parameters you're looking at. But yeah, temperature control is also a pretty important thing for, if you're brewing in the summer with no refrigeration, you're brewing in winter with no heating, that'll certainly be problematic. So,
well, I'll go back in, like, when we started expanding the brewery, of like looking at fermentation temperatures, when you're starting to look at, bigger tank sizes.
Yep.
Obviously there's a lot of heat going on there, and you're only controlling the outer portions of it. So we have different parameters for different type size tanks, just to maintain proper fermentation profile through temperature.
Yeah, we dropped.
The jackets are cooled. The jackets are cooled. The center's not, and it takes a while for that thermal mass to shift.
Yeah.
The equation I always tell people is sort of like smoking meat on a barbecue. If you just sort of wing it each time, you're not going to get any consistent result.
Yeah.
And then Quebec came along and destroyed all that philosophy.
All right.
Does the celebration recipe vary from year to year?
Nope. We've stuck with the same recipe pretty much for 39 years. Obviously a hop and a barley plant, they're agronomically different year to year. So we try to adjust for that, but no, the basic recipe stays the same.
Brian, how much nutmeg did you put in it this year?
Yeah, Mike, I was just going to do that, Byron. How much cinnamon and nutmeg do you put in it?
No, we did go to all centennials in
northern this year. Yep.
Yeah.
Used to be a bunch of centennials and cascades, and one of the issues was that's a fresh hop beer, so we take the hops right out of the field, and centennials ripen a week or two earlier than cascades typically, and so we would end up with older centennials and younger cascades if we were trying to pick the harvest window. So this way we get the centennial when it's perfect and don't have to worry about the cascade maturing.
And how did you feel about the shipping bill that first year we did Northern Hemisphere, Ken?
Yeah. Yes, it was more than we made on the beer.
He's still paying it off. Kevin, we got more questions? I think we probably do. Yeah.
What was
right outside of Alcoa? The question is, what was the Tennessee you were considering? So, right outside of Alcoa, Tennessee. So where the Alcoa aluminum plant is.
Oh, Maryville.
I believe for your Simpsons fans, it was where the Knoxville World Fair was held.
I think you just pissed off a bunch of Tennesseans.
Knoxville is the next big town, but we were looking at a site in Maryville, Pellissippi Place, for those of you who are in Tennessee.
That's a good state right there.
Do you still use the hop distillation process from Hop Hunter in any beers?
Nothing meaningful at this point. We've played around with it, but I wouldn't say it's consistent in any commercial beer that you would be buying.
Just one-offs in the restaurants.
Yeah. And it could come back.
Could come back.
Yeah. All right. Well, 40 years, Ken. Did you ever think back in 1980 when you brewed your first batch of beer that you'd be sitting around with a bunch of schmucks like Byron and myself, and obviously you were going to have kids, but that you would be sitting around talking about 40 years of making, I think, some of the, my opinion, I'm very biased, by the way, some of the greatest beer and inspiring a shitload of other breweries and brewers. What do you think?
Well, so Terrence, I guess you didn't know me 40 years ago.
No.
And I was a fairly wild guy.
Kind of like me.
So I wasn't sure. No, way wilder than you. Well, I've been around in 40 years. So this is great to be able to still be here and talk with friends and family 40 years down the road. So no, I had no clue. That it was such a foreign world then, and beer was not a thing, and there was no craft industry, and so from Did I expect this to happen? Absolutely not. We're in a place where it's great to be, but there was no heads up that this is where the world would end up. And I mean, now we're living in COVID times, so that adds a different cloud to our conversation. But I'm glad to be able to share a beer which I just drank with all of you, and it's been fun. So thanks for reminiscing with us, Terrence.
So yeah, and Brian, so 40 years from now, whenever I'm 93, and I'm sitting here hosting Facebook Live with you, are you looking forward to that?
Yeah, I mean,
Brian.
Awkward pause.
Terrence, if you're still able to host Facebook Live 40 years from now, you're on.
Thank you. I hope so.
Damn
Brian,
right, I'll be there with you.
All right. Thank you. And I think we have I think we're going to end it here with a little bit of a video. I'm actually crying right now. A little video that I think Kevin, am I right on this? Yes. Surprise. Yes. Okay. All right. We're going to end it right here. Love to everybody. Thank you. Peace.
Happy birthday, Ken.
Thanks.
Yeah. Stay on the line.
Yes.
We got a video coming.
Okay.
Hi, Ken. This is Charlie. I want to congratulate you for 40 years and all you've done for the craft beer and brewing community. And I hope at whatever celebration you have, you get to tell some of those hilarious stories about the good old days.
Hey, Ken. Rob Todd here. Congrats on 40 years. If it wasn't for pioneers like you that got going back in the old days, who knows if breweries like Allagash would be around these days. You guys have been a model for us since day one, and I wish you the best and many, many more great years to come. Cheers.
Hey Ken, Garrett here. Just wanted to congratulate you on 40 years of excellence and leadership and the beauty that is Sierra Nevada Brewing Company. Here's to you, dude.
Finally, something great out of 2020. Sierra turns 40. I first met Ken in the early 80s. I was in Yakima selecting about 1 million pounds, and this guy drove up in a Ford Falcon station wagon, and he's asking if he can have some of the sample cuts from the brews, and it was like, God, I want to hire this guy. We drop that much, on the floor all the time. So here's a guy that cares. Here's to you, Ken. Cheers.
Hey, Ken, Fritz. Congratulations on 40 years. I was thinking this morning about the good old days, and I remembered 1979. You remember there was nitrosamine in the malt, and the brewers all over the world were scared to death they had high numbers, and you and I had the only all malt beers in America. We should have been sky high, but we had 0 nitrosamines, thanks to our friends at Coors. Remember? That was fun.
I would like to give a shout out to Sierra Nevada for always being innovators and industry leaders. On behalf of a very grateful industry, congratulations to Ken Grossman and the entire Sierra Nevada team on their 40th anniversary. Cheers.
When I heard from Charlie Bamforth that Sierra Nevada was celebrating its 40th year in business, it brought back memories of the time you and I met for the first time on campus at UC Davis, well over 40 years ago. You were in the process of planning your new company, and here we are 40 years later. You've got one of the most successful craft breweries in the country, maybe even in the world, and you've created a brand and a beer that's synonymous with quality and craftsmanship. Congratulations to you and your entire team. I wish you all the best, to you, your family, the Sierra Nevada team, as you navigate into the future.
Congratulations to Sierra Nevada on 40 years. Special thank you to Ken, Sierra, Brian, and all the rest of the Sierra Nevada team from here at the Falling Rock Tap House in Denver, Colorado.
Happy 40th, Ken. You know, since the beginning, Sierra Nevada has always been a pioneer, but I think what's even more impressive is that after all this time, you've continued to grow and innovate and, you know, make the brand better. You're an inspiration to brewers all across the world, of course, for the beers, but also for the company ethos, your ethics, and the culture and class you brought to the entire industry. So to Ken and the Grossman family and the entire Sierra Nevada team, happy 40th anniversary. Here's to 40 more.
Congratulations and happy 40th anniversary to the Grossman family and the entire team at Sierra Nevada.
Not only have you been a huge inspiration and mentors to us over the years, but we are grateful and honored to have become such good friends.
Cheers and congratulations.
Congratulations, Ken, to the Grossman family from the Smith family here in Yakima, Washington. Congratulations on 40 amazing years. I want to thank you for your support of our efforts over the years in hop grilling, in brewing, and in ales for ALS. Cheers. Cheers.
Wow. That was pretty cool.
That was awesome.
You got Fritz too. That's great.
Did he bail?
Right.
Oh, there you go.
Who? Not. Hey. Thanks for everything. Thanks for keeping me employed for 26 years.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Lots of love, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, guys.
Sierra Nevada. 40 more years. Thank you.